You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 26th of January, 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, China's top military brass has been placed under investigation. We'll ask whether there's anything to the allegations or whether this is a power move by President Xi Jinping. After that,
we ended up a place that is pretty similar to where we started. So I don't really see the cause for all this really trauma that has been created amongst the people of Greenland.
A look back at the last week for Greenlanders with a government minister responsible for raw materials and law enforcement, as well as Monocle's own Alexis Self. Then we'll turn our attention to Paris, Men's Fashion Week wrapping up and haute couture about to start. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Happy Monday to all of our listeners around the world. Hope you've all had a great weekend. We will start today's show with China, where over the weekend, another two military officials, including its most senior general, have been removed from their posts and placed under investigation. It is just the latest in a series of extraordinary purges of China's top military brass over the past year, with power apparently being consolidated under President Xi Jinping. Well, to help us unpack these developments, I'm joined now by Dr. Zhi Yang, Research Fellow in the School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and by Steve Tsang, Director of the China Institute, SOAS, the University of London. Steve, if I could start with you, what do we know about what happened over the weekend, the reasons for particularly Zhang, the senior-most general's firing, anything to the allegations?
Well, the allegation is that he was effectively corrupt and was undermining the capacity of the Central Military Commission's responsibility system, but primarily about corruption. Now, the problem with the case is not that General Zhang was or was not corrupt. Essentially, you can't be a very senior Chinese general in the system and not be vulnerable to allegations of corruption because you not simply pay enough to maintain a reasonable standard of living. So everybody are vulnerable. General Zhang is widely seen as the most trusted generals by Xi Jinping, and he's been kept in office beyond retirement age because of Xi Jinping's decision. Sacking him is a very, very big deal indeed. The biggest since Xi Jinping became leader of China back in 2012. After his sacking, no Chinese general will ever feel that he is safe in office unless and until he can reassure Xi Jinping of absolute loyalty.
That is quite an incredible way to think about this. Dr. Z, if I can bring you in on that, because you have also described this as, well, really a level of instability not seen since the Cultural Revolution. Is it really that serious?
Yes, for sure. I agree with most of Steve's points about Zhang being a highly trusted officer of Xi. Both of them actually go way back to their childhood, growing up in the same elite compound. Of course, later on, they went separate ways in their careers, but eventually they converged at the top because Xi needed to put confidants in important positions to help him control the PLA. However, I would like to emphasize on one point regarding some of the motivations behind Zhang's purge. If you look at the statement that came out on Saturday, the day he was placed under investigation, it was actually very pithy. It's about violations of discipline and law. Nothing really about corruption. But then if you look at the PLA daily editorial that came out the day after, it was a whole paragraph that they only dedicated about 5 Chinese characters to corruption. So others is all about how Zhang was sort of chipping away at Xi's power and sort of undermining Xi's authority in some ways. So I would say that, beyond corruption, there's also a perspective about, power struggle behind the scenes over the distribution of authority.
Well, and if there is a power struggle, and Steve, you talked about that any general who now comes into this position will not know if they have the trust of the president. Is that how we should see this, as essentially a takeover of the military by Xi? And also, based on what you're saying there, I mean, where does this kind of go from here? I mean, how does Xi not trust anybody at this point?
Well, Xi, I think, is in a system that he has changed in a ways that he can't afford to trust anybody any longer, because he is staying in office beyond all the norms and practices and acceptable parameters of the Communist Party. But where I would slightly depart from Professor Yang's view is that I am not entirely sure I'll put it as a power struggle, because a power struggle will imply that General Zhang and others were organizing in a way to resist or oppose Xi Jinping's positions. I haven't seen really any evidence that they are doing that, which is different from they not delivering what Xi Jinping expect them to deliver or wanted them to deliver. And it could be for very good reasons. General Zhang is one of the most competent and respected generals in the Chinese military. He has one of the very few, in fact, the only one at the Central Military Commission who had actual combat command experience. And he's also of a background and vintage that would enable him to speak more freely with Xi Jinping. And therefore, somebody who could try to get the PLA to do what would be best for the PLA from the perspective of a professional soldier. And that might be something which did not satisfy Xi Jinping, and that may be the reason he is in trouble, rather than him specifically organizing opposition or competition to undermine Xi Jinping's authority or power.
Well, Dr. Yang, on that point, if this is about Zhang not necessarily doing what she wanted, remaking the military in the way that Xi Jinping might have wanted, the irony, of course, here, as you've also written about, is that China's military preparedness is at probably an all-time low as a result of this. There is no professional military experience leading the PLA at the moment. Where does the military go from here?
Yeah, well, the PLA currently does not have a chief of staff over the Joint Staff Department, which oversees the C4ISR systems of the PLA, especially emphasizing on conducting and planning of operations, collection and processing and analysis of intelligence, as well as highly secure communication channels. So Liu Zhenli, he's gone, and the current position is empty. And the CMC mostly been gutted since the first purge back in 2023 that only accelerated as time went on. Now we only have a career political commissar as the member of CMC. So at the top level, I would say, the morale is definitely declining. Other professional officers with links to Liu and Zhang are definitely living in fearing that they might be next. And yes, we have seen extraordinary advancements in terms of hardware for the PLA over the years. But in terms of top leadership, it's in a very bad position right now.
Steve, in terms of the allies and enemies, frankly, of China, particularly I wanted to ask you actually about Taiwan, because that is a place that we'll be watching this extremely closely. Will there almost be, a sigh of relief from Taiwan if this means that perhaps China's military is unable to engage with Taiwan in the way that people might have expected given this turmoil? Or will there be a worry that instability in the military ranks just makes it even harder to know what China's going to do?
In the very immediate term, Taipei may probably feel a sign of relief because the PLA is in a bit of turmoil. But over the longer term, I think the Taiwanese would be very, very uncomfortable with what happens in the PLA today. The reasons are this. One, at the operational level, the Chinese command structure is divided into combat theaters. And the Taiwan operations and that kind of intimidation would be managed at the theater level, and therefore the huge disruptions at the top command level would not means that the PLA cannot conduct the intimidation that is happening. But invasion is a different story. Invasion would be a much more complicated issue. And if the PLA is purged of able professional soldiers who will be able to assess the actual risk involved in American deterrence against a Chinese use of force against Taiwan, and can therefore allow the political officers advising Xi Jinping to look at the risk for invasion, the risk of miscalculation substantially increases. And that's bad for Taiwan, bad for China and the PLA, and also bad for the world. We don't want to see a situation of a war with China over Taiwan, particularly one that is going to be very, very messy indeed.
Steve Tsang, Director of the China Institute at SOAS, University of London, and Dr. Ziyang of Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Thank you both for joining us today. And now here's Monocle's Laura Kramer with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. At least 18 people have died after a ferry sank off the southern Philippines with more than 350 people on board. Rescuers have saved more than 300 people, but about 24 are still missing. Officials are investigating the cause. Train services in Catalonia have been suspended, extending nearly a week of major disruption and service cancellations. It comes after 2 deadly accidents earlier this month raised concerns about safety and maintenance across Spain's rail network. Train drivers are calling for a nationwide strike. Airbus is warning staff to brace for a turbulent year as global hostilities hit the aviation industry. The company says tensions between the U.S., China, and Europe are disrupting supplies and raising costs. The warning comes as President Donald Trump ramps up criticism of longtime U.S. allies, including Canada. And thousands of visitors packed a Tokyo zoo to say goodbye to Japan's last 2 giant pandas. The cubs will begin their return to China on Tuesday, leaving Japan without pandas for the first time in more than 50 years. It comes as tensions rise between Tokyo and Beijing. Those are the headlines here in Zurich. Chris, back to you in London.
Thank you very much, Laura in Zurich. Such a sad development for Japan at the end there. Well, to Greenland now, which will be back to a semblance of normality this week after a supposed framework deal last week that de-escalated its crisis with the United States. Among those who witnessed the ups and downs of Greenland's tumultuous week in the news was Monocle's foreign editor Alexis Self, who is back from Nuuk. You join me right here in the studio. Good afternoon, Lex.
Good afternoon, Chris. Good to be here.
Good to be here. Did you bring me anything? Do I get a souvenir?
The walrus skull is upstairs. I just put it on your desk.
Walrus skull. I love that. Okay, I look forward to that. And for any listeners wondering, it's definitely up there at this very moment. What was it like to be there last week, Lex? And just it's such an extraordinary week of ups and downs. That's what really strikes me about it, right? For this time that you were there, from Monday to Friday, you went from a real risk of military confrontation to just sort of Trump no longer seems to care, maybe. He's just reached a deal. I mean, just walk me through those emotions that you're going through with Greenlanders.
Yeah, it was a week on Trump's social media feed in extremis. You could really feel the mood change after his speech at Davos on Wednesday, in which he ruled out using force to take Greenland, which, if I'd said that sentence a few weeks ago, would have really surprised and shocked me. I suppose most obviously from the government side in Greenland. You know, these are politicians who are not used to the media glare, certainly not the international media glare. And there was a real rabbit in the headlights feel to some of them, observing them, including the Prime Minister, who's 34 years old and is now a household name in much of the world, but would not have been prepared for that. And on Tuesday, he gave a press conference in which he told Greenlanders to prepare for the worst, basically. The US invasion was not likely, but it was a possibility, and therefore they should be prepared for such an eventuality. And then I attended a press conference just after Trump's speech on Wednesday, an hour or two afterwards, and the two Greenlandic government ministers present were smiling, laughing at the kind of kerfuffle of the international media in this very small press conference room in the Greenlandic parliament. So in that sense, it was very much evident how the mood and the tension built up and then didn't completely pop, but it eased massively by the time that we left on Friday.
Yeah, it's sort of a release for them, which brings us to this week. We are back to what we were discussing, Lex, the week before, or the couple of weeks before all of this started, which is Ukraine. And I know there was a lot of frustration even last week in, say, Davos, European leaders and ministers saying there's an actual conflict going on. We should be focusing on that. Instead, we're focusing on Greenland. Now we are back to Ukraine. There are trilateral talks over the weekend. What sense do you get about these US, Russia, Ukraine talks, everything else that might be happening this week? Are we actually close to a deal this time?
Well, I'm glad we're keeping our Monday afternoon tradition alive of you asking me about the Ukraine-Russia peace deal. I don't think it's going to happen this week. Is it going to happen this year? Perhaps. It looks like the Russians aren't budging on demanding the whole of the Donbass, including areas that they haven't been able to take by force. This remains a red line for Ukraine, and therefore something, red lines perhaps don't. It's a light red line. There are red lines, and then there are light red lines. I think if they got something big in return for such a territorial concession, like NATO membership or at least Article 5 style US security guarantee, then they might consider it. Is the US willing to offer them that? It would be pretty big if so. There's talk of a security agreement being on the table. I don't know what's in it, but if it's that, then that's huge, and that might be the thing that pushes us along and prevents you from asking me this question again.
Apparently, maybe we'll wait until next week. You're expecting nothing until then. We'll see if that just, now that you've said it, if it blows up in your face and there's amazingly actually a deal this week. But I'm not going to hold you to it just yet. Alexis Self, Monocle's foreign editor, thank you very much for joining us. Now, listeners will know that in addition to Lex, Monocle Radio's Andrew Muller has been stationed in Nuuk for the past week, hosting the Monocle Daily, and among those that Andrew spoke with is Naya Nathanielsen, Greenland's Minister for Industry, Raw Materials, Mining, Energy, Law Enforcement and Equality. She does have a busy job. Andrew began by asking the minister to sum up just how weird the last week had been.
I think bewilderment is really the word that catches it the best. It's been really strange, and we've been trying to figure out the big question why since it all broke out.
Have you arrived at any answer to that?
Not really, no, because I still think that we ended up a place that is pretty similar to where we started. So I don't really see the cause for all this really trauma that has been created amongst the people of Greenland. It's been a wild week, and people have been generally concerned. And for me, of course, I've been having stuff to do, so I've been keeping myself busy. But for many people, this has been really filling every moment of every day.
We'll get on to topics related to your portfolio shortly, but just in terms of what you've heard from your own voters, your own constituents, I mean, how worried have they been?
Generally worried. People are worried. People are concerned. People are afraid. This is not only an ally, but a very, very big country that has threatened us with occupation, really, because of course Greenlanders has been saying quite consistently, please no, we do not want to be American. And even then, this has not been taken in, and threats have continued. And I think this has really scared people, because we are such a small country, and we are fully aware that the NATO alliance exists partly due to the great contribution from the states. And if NATO was to falter, then the whole world order would really see dramatically different, have a dramatically different profile, all because of us. And we have realized this. So both this thing about being the center of the world's attention, being an epicenter for a changing world order, just like January last year, but also just being afraid of your own household, your own family, your friends, your livelihood, all of that, all in once.
I mean, we're speaking on Friday afternoon in Nuuk, and at the risk of tempting fate, the immediate threat seems to have dissipated. But if the United States has backed off and has abandoned the idea of acquiring Greenland, do you worry that this last week and this last year will have changed Greenland permanently?
I really, really believe deep down that the world has changed. We said this last year. The world order has changed, and I think the world has to get on board with it. The Prime Minister of Canada spoke quite clearly when he said it's not a rift, it's a rupture. Things have already changed, and we have to find our footing in it, everyone. And I think there is a lot of wishful thinking in many countries, a pining for the past, but this is behind us, and we now have to figure out how do we position ourselves? What kind of values do we want to take on into this new world? What kind of international profile do we want in this changing world?
I mean, one of the reasons that has been advanced by President Trump and by the United States for their interest in Greenland is, of course, its mineral resources. Does anyone actually know, though, what is there? Has anyone been able to quantify how mineral-rich Greenland is?
Well, Greenland is very mineral-rich. We have a lot of untapped resources still. We know they're there, but they haven't been mined to any great extent yet. So we are what you call a greenfield country. So any mining in Greenland will be very long-term, very high risk, very capital intensive. That is the framework we are working within. For us, it's a success if we 5-10 years from now will have a stable, maybe 2, 3, 5 stable mines in operation. But that's the scheme of it. We're never going to be a very, very big mining country.
And all of that will require considerable outside investment, and I'm sure the United States would be the likeliest source of that. But has the last year or so made Greenlanders, do you think, less inclined to trust the United States entirely again?
Well, actually, our main source of investments come from Europe, from the UK, from Australia. Canada is great investors into the Greenlandic mining sector. So not a lot of American investment so far. Of course, we have been hoping to see it, but we're not there yet. I think when it comes to harvesting Greenlandic resources, we are quite pragmatic. This is what we've got. We realize fully well we have to harvest our resources in order to survive. This is a fishery stock, that is minerals, that is our energy potentials, and so on. So we're not naive about that. We are pragmatic about that. When it comes to who do you perceive to be your allies, of course, we still look upon the US as an ally, but an ally is not necessarily a great friend. And I think there has to be rebuilt trust. And I think this does not only go for Greenland. I think that goes for a lot of countries in Europe as well.
Naya Nathanielsen there, Greenland's Minister for Industry, Raw Materials, Mining, Energy, Law Enforcement and Equality, speaking with Andrew Muller in Nuuk. To hear the full interview, you can listen to the latest episode of The Foreign Desk, available at monocle.com or wherever you get your podcasts. The entire show came out of Nuuk, the one that was out last Saturday. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak, and finally on today's show, Paris's Men's Fashion Week has wrapped up, but haute couture is about to start. And joining me now from our Paris studio is Marc Bourget, fashion columnist for Quotidien. Bonjour, Marc.
Bonjour.
Good to have you on the show for us. Give us some
Thanks a lot.
Give us some reflections, first of all, if you could. What were your personal highlights?
So I went to Milan and I did Paris too. The global feeling talking to people was that it was a good season. I don't really know what it means actually, but people seem to be happy, especially the US journalists coming to Europe were happy to leave the US and spend a few days in Paris and Milan, and a lot of them are staying a few more days before getting back there because of the snow and maybe because of the general atmosphere. So it was a good season, and with some good shows, some bad ones also, but a few good ones. Do you want me to name the names?
Yeah, sure, but before we get there, just curious then, if you say that, the American journalists were happy, what was it like for the Parisians themselves? Fashion Week in January, is it sort of an escape from the cold and dark January there too?
A bit, but June is always better, as you can have drinks outside of the shows before. But no, the general feeling, I don't know how to say it, but people seem quite happy with what they were seeing. So good atmosphere, good energy. And we are not, the holidays are not too far away. We were on holidays a couple of weeks back, so we are still on that energy level.
Still in a good mood.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Well, give me then a little bit of a rundown. Name some shows for us, some that struck you particularly.
Yeah, the good ones. So I would say Prada was very strong in Milan. You feel the fact that clever people are thinking the clothes, that it's a culture rather than a brand, also a culture. So that was strong, impressive, maybe more than the couple of past season. Ralph Lauren was very good on his return to Milan after 20 years. You could feel that he decided to say that despite of all the brands that are emerging on use Ralph Lauren influence as an inspiration, such as Aimé Leon Dore, for instance, he remains the creator of that trend. He remains the boss, so you could feel that. Zegna was strong as it usually is. Armani on the first show after the death of Mr. Giorgio Armani was pretty emotional, very much based on the brand history rather than the future of Armani, which of course we're all curious to see how it turns out for the Italian brand. In Paris, Dries Van Noten was very strong. The new artistic director is really making the brand his own without betraying the heritage of the brand. It has been a good show for the past 2 seasons, and this one was very strong. Who else could I name? Sakai, she's doing the same thing again and again after season, which is taking classical garments, the duffel coat, the fly jacket, the blazer, and making it Sakai. So deconstructing the garments, making them more modern, changing the fabrics, changing the details, but you can still identify the inspiration. And sometimes we say that designers, when they do the same thing season after season, we say it's boring. I personally like it. On the other end, when a designer changes everything season after season, I am lost, which happened to say at Dior with Jonathan Anderson's second show. I couldn't see the link to the first show. I know some friends, some people watched it and like the chaos of that second show, menswear show for Jonathan Anderson. I personally found it. I didn't know what I was looking at, to be honest. Do not make it bad, make it a bit confusing to me. But I know some people, clever people, probably more than me, loved it. So, fashion is we all have an opinion on clothes.
It is absolutely in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? But you prefer some of that continuity, which does make me wonder, from your perspective then, what comes out of something like Paris Men's Fashion Week? Is there something you would like to see in terms of trends, sales now, kind of setting the agenda for the year for fashion?
There was something that I loved, which wasn't a show, that was Celine. And Celine, they didn't do a show, they did a presentation for the menswear. And so you could touch the clothes, you could see them, picture them very easily. And they decided that they wouldn't have a story, basically. They wouldn't do storytelling. They would just do good clothes, probably very expensive though, but good clothes, good colors, good styling, things you want to wear. And that's exactly what happened when you were looking at Celine. You want to wear everything. And to me, every brand needs a lot of words nowadays to explain a collection. Jonathan Anderson used a lot of words to explain what he was doing, the inspiration, the Paul Poiret thing, a lot of sentences to explain clothes. I think when you look at clothes, it should be instinctive. And Celine, you looked at the clothes, there was no story, no precise references to any past designers. It was just clothes you want to wear. And I think brands should do that. I think there is too much speech around the clothes and the collection, and I personally appreciate a brand putting a good product in front of me and making me want to buy it and wear it. That's what Celine did, and I don't know if it will sell, if it will be a hit, if it's not enough to do that anymore. But strangely, that very classical approach to fashion is rarely done nowadays by brands. They do a lot they use a lot of words. But Celine was quite silent. Just look at the clothes and you may like them, and I did like them.
Fashion should be about clothes you want to wear. Inspirational words from Marc Bourget. Thank you very much for joining us. Very simple. Marc Bourget is a fashion columnist for Quotidien. Thank you very much for joining us from our Paris studio. That is all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Hassan Anderson and Mariella Bevan. Our researcher was Annelise Maynard. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.